Right, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Reuben stole my medal from me yesterday. I said, Reuben, this piece of metal is worth $3.75 billion, this piece of metal. Actually, this is a stand-in piece of metal because I keep losing it. I've got the actual metal that one of my companies produced back in a red velvet pouch at home so I can spot it no matter where it's laying, but I've lost it 3 or 4 times. But actually, this stand-in metal, it's actually a key, the back of a key from a hotel room in St. John. So anyway, this metal is a metal that a company I own has produced. It is a metal that was invented about 1.5 years ago and has been certified by NASA, the Glenn Research Center at NASA, as being the hardest metal ever produced by man. It is a way of tricking tantalum, the element tantalum, into a matrix with boron, into a matrix with a working metal, be it iron or nickel, those types of elements, and making that matrix think that it is a diamond or a yellow diamond. And indeed, the theory worked. We submitted it for testing. We send the metal to labs, advanced labs, to grind, and they call us back invariably and say, what the heck is this stuff? We can't grind it. It has enormous potential. I named the technology exspatial technology. We've brought it to the market, and of course, immediately we have 14 companies that want to buy it right now, the biggest names in the industry. It has the potential to solve the human hip joint prosthesis problem, the human knee problem. We have already coated titanium with this process, and titanium has never been coated before. Titanium is actually a very vulnerable and not a very durable metal at all, despite the colloquial myth about titanium. Titanium, the advantage is actually that it is light and is used in military and performance aircraft because of its weight, but not because of its durability. It's not strong at all. We've developed a way to make titanium as hard as yellow diamond. The myriad applications for this technology just continue to amaze me. The market survey that I put on this is about a base value of $3.75 billion, and I keep leaving the metal on Starbucks tables and in my hotel rooms and things like that. So I let Reuben know that it's worth a lot. At least the stand-in piece is not worth a lot, but the metal is worth a lot. This presentation, the subject that is near and dear to my heart, is the subject of value. The goodwill of this type of company is obviously enormous, potentially enormous. Even the patents that we filed that have been accepted in Europe, China, and the US have enormous implications, if not true goodwill value. Value is at the heart and soul of every business's management horizon. I own a consulting firm, obviously, hit the mic too. Obviously, Ampri Consulting Group. I'm the majority owner in Ampri. I own 2 other consulting firms, an IT firm, and then a firm in India, in Mumbai, India, with whom I work very closely. But I also own, I'm a partner in a consortium of consumer products companies, a catalog, a retailer, and a wholesale importer of consumer goods under the name of Collectible Brands. And the president of Collectible Brands, Howard Fox, called me one afternoon and he said, Roger, we've got a problem. One of our products that we're importing from Spain, it's our flagship brand. It's our flagship product inside that brand name. It produces normally for us on the order of a 45 to 65% gross margin, or the margin above cost purchase, the landed cost for that product in the US. And there's a guy in North Carolina who's beating us, selling this product out of his garage on eBay for $5 above our cost purchase with the manufacturer. So I said, okay, let's get Paolo. Paolo has moved from Italy to Spain and created an excellent manufacturer in Spain, produces fine artisan products in this category that we're selling, and indeed makes this product. Let's get Paolo on the phone tonight and ask him the question, are you selling directly to a guy out of his garage in North Carolina for below our cost? And then I've got a second question for him as well. So we got Paulo on the phone that night. I said, Paulo, are you selling to a guy in North Carolina? And he said, no, Roger, you know I only have 3 authorized wholesalers in the US. You know that I give you the price that's competitive. And I said, Paulo, I believe you, but we had to ask just to make sure. But I've got a second question for you. Why are you asking me to buy 3,000 units on each of my master purchase orders 6 months in advance? Well, Roger, you see, we have mechanisms that are set up, and 3,000 units is the efficiency truncheon that we've set. It's your incentive buy point that we've established, which allows us to pass on to you the most efficient cost per unit that we can give you. And I said, well, I appreciate that. I said, let me ask you, Paula, what would be the difference between if I issued a purchase order, a master PO commitment for 1,800 units versus 3,000 units? What's the delta on the efficiency that we're looking at? And Paulo said, it is easily 6%. And I said, okay, 6% on cost purchases, and the gross margin on this item is 62%. So we're looking at a 38% cost basis times the 6%. So to the end consumer, in my keystoning, or the process by which I develop pricing, we're looking at a 2% sensitivity model, 2% that the consumer can save, or you can take the profitability, Paulo interjects. I said, comparatively, when I take the 3 entities who are buying this product in the U.S. at wholesale, each buying 3,000, correct? And Paulo said, yes, that is correct. That product is being dumped to a guy in North Carolina who's selling it at $5 above cost. And do you realize that is a 65% markdown off retail, all to save 2% in efficiency? Paulo, let me ask you the question, can all the wholesalers next year purchase at a truncheon incentive level of 1,800 units? He said, I will call you back tonight. Paulo called us back, Howard and I sat there, and he said, you have convinced me. I'm destroying my own brand for 2%. And that, after doing 160 strategies for consumer products companies across the U.S. since really 1989, I guess, when I started the strategy practice at DCB and Company, my old company, whom I sold, or which I sold to an Indian interest. After 160 some odd consumer product strategies, that's the conclusion that it took my thick skull to gain access to across about 18 years of running strategy, is that we are serving the master of efficiency and killing and serving the master of external compliance and reporting in addition, which is something near and dear to your hearts, and killing the very things that we use as our DNA to exact sound business acumen at the same time. That, as I mentioned before, that is what my focus is. If I look at the executive management in U.S. corporations today, as they get larger and larger, to a degree, they are blind babysitters, babysitting vertical, siloed profit and loss statements, and have no idea what their net effect of their decisions are on the profitability of their product. In other words, they're going for that 2% with Paulo and getting a bonus because they executed that 2% at a 3,000 unit buy point. That's backwards and wrong. A second message that's wound up in that I believe is an important message for the U.S. economy in particular, is that inflation is not necessarily an effect of the prime or the core lending rate that the Fed uses to feed M1. It's influenced by it. Inflation is not necessarily the rise in prices or the consumer price index. Inflation is a dilution of and a displacement of value. When our companies can no longer focus on making the hardest metal in the world, when our companies can no longer focus on making their product perform at a healthy economic or wealth building price point, which might be a 25% discount for Paulo's product, not a 65% discount for Paulo's product, that's when we lose. And what we did in the case with this supplier for collectible brands, we were able to correct that overbuying situation, narrow back down or skinny back down the quantity of supply in the United States, bring our discount level back up to 25%, and all of a sudden, Paulo was winning. All our competitors were winning, amazingly, and we did that for our competitors as well, and we were winning. And Paulo's brand was sustained. The only loser in the whole process was a guy making $5 a unit out of his garage in North Carolina. When I met with, recently, I'll sort of go into my qualifications here. just so you understand some of the background I've got. Really, at the very bottom here, one of the projects that I completed was about a 3-year study for Vice Premier Wang Qishan of the People's Republic of China. It was sponsored by a consortium out of London, out of Beijing, and out of the U.S., trade zone partners out of the U.S. One of the conclusions there, as I was presenting with Senator Claire McCaskill and Senator Kit Bond at the 4th Sino-U.S. Economic Summit, one of the questions came from the Chinese delegation. And he stopped me in the middle of my presentation, which is not typically Chinese protocol. It was an exception. And he said, so I've just come from a meeting where the U.S. side and the Canadian side are accusing China of product dumping. What you are telling me is that it's not just product dumping, you overorder. And I said, actually, indeed, you are correct. One of the things that I want to bring out here in terms of value is an effect that we have with regard to consumer products, through this background and experience here, where we are producing our own economic decline through things that are being taught in our universities as first responsibilities and diligences on the part of management, when in fact, they're not. And as I mentioned, I'm Roger Cunningham. That is my mission as the CEO of Omprix Strategy Group, Omprix Consulting Group. I didn't have to create this firm. I have a number of other businesses. But to get this mission out there, I think this vehicle, this medium, is my best way to get this message out. I came out of Georgia Tech, went through the Navy, went through Naval Intelligence for about 5.5 years until my boss was killed and they put me in his position. So at 27 years old, I was the Director of Special Intelligence for the Navy. I was a bit young for that, but after he was killed, I decided to go out and get into industry. About 22 years with regard to consumer product strategy, brought up DCB and Company, sold DCB and Company, and then had a wealth of experience. And I guess just to quickly highlight here, the Home Depot RDC value chain strategy, which just completed. It was about a 3-year study, reversing much of what Home Depot did during the 90s, which was not healthy from a business standpoint, but looked fantastic to Wall Street. We reversed much of that. It was a very satisfying move for Home Depot. But to move out of those qualifications, to briefly today, what I'd like to do is run through current economic underpinning just briefly, define what is a value channel, understand the current industry weakness, understand value channel strategy, and then go through 2 case histories. And we'll go through that quickly so everybody can get focused on getting home. Current economic underpinnings, really since 1999, every single vertical, both derivative verticals and core economic verticals, I consider farm production, food production, medical services, consumer goods production. Those are core economic activities, manufacturing, the wholesale trade of goods, the consumption of goods. There are many direct derivative economic activities like insurance or legal or those types of things that really depend on and hinge upon the success of underlying economic verticals. But all the verticals for the U.S. have softened. This is a logarithmic curve of the NASDAQ present value here in the bolder red curve here. All of our economic verticals have softened since 1999. Arguably, consumer products comprises about 35% of U.S. GDP. I argue that if you remove derivative economic activity and verticals from that figure, that it's much more akin to 60 to 65%. It is the problems that we experience inside of the manufacturing, trade, and consumption of goods are part and parcel to our economic malaise. And I believe that this presentation elicits some of why we're struggling with that now. As you can see, really we're looking at a principle here wherein the value you derive as a company, if companies are able to produce innovation and technology, value is what produces wealth. And then wealth is what pays taxes or keeps you out of fiscal deficits and trade deficits. So where your value goes, so goes your wealth. And then where your wealth goes, so goes your tax base. And we suffer from a loss of all 3 of those. There it comes up. Inflation, as I've gone through strategies, as I look at corporations who are effective, or as I've flown in on Sunday night to help try and be part of the team that's rescuing a company that's about to declare bankruptcy or go out of business, inflation, really, counterinflationary activity activities, really, from my standpoint, are comprised by these elements: ideas, brand, innovation, applied technology, industrialization, and mobilization. The things that relate to inflation, and I've also consulted for probably 20, 25 some odd countries on the development of their consumer goods infrastructure, and also health and energy. The things that I see in those countries that contribute to inflation, for instance, I think Turkey was, in the time I worked with some entities in Turkey, we were looking at 86% inflation at the time. The things that imbue inflation into an economy are bureaucracy, entitlement, corruption, programming, monetization, and fear. Those are the things that we're chasing very heartily right now as a U.S. Economic population. There we go. So as I mentioned earlier, I talked about inflation being a dilution of and a displacement of value. Value being those things that you provide, the thoughts, the talent, the skills, the expertise, the accidental discoveries, the purposeful discoveries, the scientific method, those things that we bring to bear which have value, those are the things that are counterinflationary. This value chain right here is a typical value chain for a consumer good that is consumed in the United States. This actually reflects Walmart's value chain right here, but I'm not here to pick on Walmart, although I will pick on Walmart here. One of my clients with Mike Duke at Walmart in the past. Of the 23 wealth build points that we typically experience in the development and the consumption of a product in the United States, we have shifted 18 of those wealth build points into other areas. That's offshore, intermediate corporations, multinational corporations. Only the remaining set, this last margin set here, remain as value building activities in the U.S. footprint. To a degree, I see some of our retailers, much akin to a Halloween character showing up your front door and knocking on the door, and they're wearing the mask of a U.S. corporation. Yet the value that they're building, the wealth that they're imparting to the U.S. footprint, is extraordinarily thin comparative to what they do as a GDP contribution. So my conclusion across the last probably 22 years, majority 18 years of this, is that we have several maladies that we have produced out of this. We have created, from a consumer goods standpoint, an offshore efficiency, horizontal sourcing monopoly. This is not a monopoly that is your traditional vertical monopoly. Oh, I've cornered the market on scalpels, or I've cornered the market on silver. All these sub-vertical traditional views that 1905 Sherman Antitrust Act addressed in terms of monopolization and trust establishment. We have created with consumer goods a non-competitive horizontal offshore trust, such that in order to get lowest cost goods, in order to get Paulo's 2% discount and beat Paulo's 2% discount, I need to go to the buying agencies in Kowloon and Hong Kong in order to give myself enough clout to produce the volume for a large store chain, and to also have the price competitiveness that can put all of my competitors out of business. If I'm able to do that, I have to ally with several entities which exist offshore in order to support and aid and enable my obtaining these consumer goods. That is a horizontal or a value chain trust. And I see that as one of our chief maladies right now, which removes competitiveness from the U.S. footprint. Our current model of long lead time buying, in order to serve my profit and loss statement, in order to get my lowest price, typically I'm having to issue a master purchase order. One of my clients right now is Under Armour. I've done 12 years of strategy for Under Armour. Under Armour has to issue its purchase orders 12 to 18 months in advance and make those commitments for raw materials, colors, dye lots, size, style, colors, color, style, widths, pretty much 18 months in advance. The problem is that the information we have 18 months in advance is extraordinarily weak. It's like buying t-shirts announcing who won the presidential election, but you had to put the order in about a year ago, and we still don't know. Typically, when we get in through the sell-through of a season, like Talbot's and Chico's did back in 2002, we end up with a much more sound information set, which allows us to plan the sell-through of an item. So our long lead times promote overbuying to hedge risk, and we'll go through that in a moment. Our exit strategies, though, whoops, we made a mistake. Our overbuying, our purposeful overbuying, as well as our accidental overbuying, we're dumping to exit channels so that Marshalls, TJ Maxx, Ross Stores, eBay, Craigslist, those are thriving GDP economies. They're not really building much wealth. They're recovering some cash, but exit channel dumping is destroying the brand value and the innate value of our consumer goods. And then finally, as I mentioned before, we have shifted our wealth, our value centers offshore. And those value centers that we've kept onshore, we've diluted those value centers. The result is a loss in wealth and a loss in tax basis. So those are the four core elements which comprise the heart of our current economic underpinnings. And again, consumer goods only from the U.S. GDP standpoint, the U.S. Bureau of Trade Statistics is only 35% of the U.S. GDP. But remember, a good 30% of the U.S. economy is derivative economic activity. In other words, it relies on a healthy farm infrastructure, a healthy imports and manufacturing infrastructure. So a value channel is simply a mechanism that allows organizations to cross verticals. To a degree, inside a profit and loss statement, I really don't care what your freight budget is. I really don't care what your marketing budget is. I really don't care that you reduced fringe by 2 percentage points last year. I really don't care what your facility operations and overhead are in SG&A. Those are not things that allow me to manage a business. It's much akin to driving a car down a highway at night without your headlights on, and you're reporting over the radio 1,000 cars to external authorities. I'm doing fine. I'm going 50 miles per hour, and there has been no loud crashing and banging so far. So these external authorities are saying, okay, buy everybody who's not making loud noises and crashing and banging. And anybody who is making loud noises, crashing and banging, wait until there's dead silence, then buy them. And that's the wealth, that's the wisdom that I see on Wall Street through my experience. What a value chain strategy is, it is a BI, or a business intelligence initiative, at its heart and soul. It crosses organizational verticals and turns the headlights on for the automobile. The statement here that we've used as an example, this is actually a children's apparel retailer with whom we worked 2 years ago. We found an anomaly where they were getting the 17 cents a unit savings in their efficiency inside their P&L. And the one individual who found this savings opportunity was getting all kinds of accolades. But as we mapped this business process through to their customer, the end customer, Kohl's, was losing $2.70 a unit on average. And it was an extraordinary loss for both Kohl's and this supplier of children's apparel. When we brought the value chain initiative, or the principle, to the organization, this executive said, I get it. You know, you're right. The 17 cents is killing us, but I'll tell you what, I've got 2 kids in college. I've got a $375,000 bonus riding on getting this 17 cents. So unless we are able to let all facets of the organization see this, it's not going to be a principle. Value chain economics, value chain strategy will not be a principle that can rise to the top and change the way we think and exercise business acumen. But a value chain in its essence is horizontal, or to a degree, many times when I'm talking with accountants and the financial aspects or organization inside of a consumer products company, it's horizontal accounting as opposed to vertical P&L accounting, one way to look at it. But cross-vertical and cross-silo. A value chain is simply nothing but an alignment of resources which produces, and those resources could be product design, the manufacturing, the sourcing demand, the supply chain, consumption management, the stores, your customer stores, all the activities that imbue value, and for the entities who execute those activities produce wealth. A value chain is nothing but a tally, horizontally, of all those investments that produce a sound or valid business outcome. From my standpoint, the weakest companies that I supported in the 160 strategies that I've done, the weakest, the least effective, the most failure-prone companies that I ran across were the ones who first focused on processes, best practices, and efficiency. Those were the companies that were going out of business. Now, you'll hear many case examples of some of the largest sub-vertical leaders inside of consumer goods saying, oh, we won, we've got the best practice set. From my standpoint, in an inflationary economy, many times the last company that has put everybody else out of business and is thriving on efficiency is simply the last loser, and the last loser can't go out of business. I would rather not produce a nation of companies that are just the last losers and focus on efficiency and cost reductions. The purpose of a value channel strategy is to realign the resources, the mindset, and the organization of a consumer products company in particular, but we also use this for national infrastructure and services. It's not as manifest in those arenas, to produce brand establishment and protection. Under Armour, we must protect this house. That is their #1 mandate. Speed to margin strategies. We don't move fast just for the sake of being fast. We don't move efficiently just for the sake of moving efficiently. There are reasons we must do these things, and they need to be done to the right things at the right time. Speed to margin is one of those effects. Markdown and exit avoidance as a goal, risk mitigation or mission goals. Many times when we've worked with the U.S. military, mission goals are akin to feeding goodwill, if you look at it from an economic standpoint. Those are the goals, the outcomes of a value channel strategy. So a value channel strategy is nothing more than aligning the resources we input and matching those resources and investments to the valid business outcome and quantifying that business outcome. That is the essence, the part and parcel to a value chain strategy. It took me 22 years to figure that out. As I express it, it sounds so simple. Why didn't I think of that day one? I don't know, but I think many businesses in the U.S. are blind to this principle, even currently. As I look at the industry, if we look at horizontal, not vertical accounting, focus on margin, not brand, or margin and brand, not efficiency, organizational collaboration, the focus on building wealth at each of the points, not necessarily avoiding offshoring, that's not my contention here, but building wealth and understanding how to build wealth for your partners, both onshore and offshore, being key. And then developing organizations which are responsible and sustainable. Again, many of the businesses that were failing and going through bankruptcy, I found to be focused on process, best practice, and efficiency, rather than the necessary goals of business acumen. Understanding current industry weakness, we've gone through that. Everything from gross margin return on investment, GMROI, I believe to be a joke, but it is the #1 externally viewed principle with regard to inventory holding consumer products companies, so in other words, wholesalers and retailers. Gross margin return on investment is simply my gross margin divided by the inventory held. So companies that skinny down their inventories are more attractive to Wall Street. And I consider that absolute baloney, because #1, your investment is everything you do to get that product to turn at a full gross margin, not what you spent on the product, not the cost purchase. And #2, it hides a myriad set of bad practices, #1 of which that most of our overbuys are simply hidden in transit. They're hidden from Wall Street. They're off balance sheet. They moved out of warehouses, and that's generally a good move. And they moved on to ships where they reside off balance sheet for a good portion of the time. So GMROI is an example. This is Walmart's rough cut, if you will, income statement. For 2012, I think we're looking at $436 billion as its GDP contribution. The consolidated net income for Walmart is $3.6 billion, which is a paltry wealth build for the corporation versus the business that they displaced or they diluted. In this case, the business that used to comprise that $436 billion equivalent in the U.S. footprint in terms of consumer goods used to drive north of $30 billion in wealth. Yes, we're efficient with Walmart, but we're only deriving 8.6% of the value chain wealth build out of those products. If I buy a broom at Walmart, 8.6% of that is actually returning back to dollars, which can be used to buy more brooms at Walmart. And we end up with a deflationary, some of the older terms, I guess, that came out of the 70s, a stagflationary condition where, yes, our efficiency produced lower prices. Yes, we bought Paulo's third truncheon and bought 3,000 units. Yes, we're the most efficient mechanism, or maybe deemed as the last loser, and we reduced prices, But the net effect is that buying power and wealth has dropped faster than our price reductions and our efficiencies have afforded us benefit. And that's what I believe to be an inflationary economic condition, not earmarked by the rise in prices, but earmarked rather by the drop in value, the displacement of value out of the U.S. household. Mentioned the 14 to 18 month buying in advance, but I'll go in a little more detail. My apologies for this graph. This actually is a graph that is extracted from one of the software packages used to purchase consumer goods, and I won't say which one, but the top four, if you really look at consumer goods, SAP, famous name, Oracle, famous name, all very competent packages. My software company has integrated SAP and Oracle. JDA is another very competent package on the market. All of them very savvy handling of consumer goods. This is actually the demand signal for this green line, demand signal for a product sell-through for a season. Typically, planners begin and estimate 14 to 18 months, 8 months in advance, depending on the product category, their demand plan for that item. And in each case, they're given the choice. Do I think this product is going to underperform, or do I think this product has the potential of overperforming? If this product underperforms, my recourse is to regain cash against cost purchases, and indeed, Ross Stores buys unclaimed overstock and other category excesses at 11 cents on the dollar. And that's public information. They are able to buy that product as distressed merchandise, which underperforms this plan and is down in this cross-hatched section of the consumption plan. If an item overperforms, then everybody celebrates, and I earn extraordinarily good gross margin, 85% gross margin for a really fine fashion item, or even Under Armour, their top performing categories are pushing that range. So if I undersell, if my item underperforms, I have a recourse. If my item overperforms, I don't want to be out of stock. If my item underperforms, I may get a spank on the hand. If my item overperforms and I don't have enough of it, I may get fired. So the reaction both systemically and also habitually on the part of the planners is to overbuy on every category with added incentive brought by the sourcing partners who are offering trade truncheons and incentive buy points, which encourage an additional buy. And the effect of that is the same effect as product dumping on the U.S. footprint. So if we have a situation where our sourcing country, not to pick on China here, but if our sourcing countries tax on the gross economic activity, if the margins that are embedded in their production are fixed margins, and we compare that situation to where our margins are at risk, they could be positive 65%, they could be negative 35%, and our taxation is done on the consolidated net income, we have a situation where if I'm a gambler, I'll take guaranteed 8% anytime over maybe 35, maybe negative 35. I will take the guarantee every time. The net effect of that has been a shift of wealth toward the producing nations, or really a classic play that is akin to product dumping on the consumption footprint. That I believe to be part of the economic malaise that we face right now. So we're like lemmings running off a cliff where everyone's saying increase our efficiency. As we look at a value chain strategy, we've already gone through that. A value chain strategy is simply getting away from vertical P&Ls, getting away from blindly babysitting expense accounts and rice bowls and my vertical inside of a P&L, and returning a business back to the sound management of business principles, horizontal accounting, if you will. That is a value chain strategy. Investment in resources to produce a valid business outcome. This is an actual shot off of the screen. The package that we use is called amperage, a contraction of edge and ampere. This is one of the actual screens off the software package we use. On this, you can see at the top right all the different options at your avail, both efficient and non-efficient, if you use the industry terminology, to move a product all the way into a non-returning customer's satisfied hands. That entire cost. As you look down on the bottom left, you see the line that's called savings. If I tally up all the best practices from the Harvard Business Review, all the best practices that are coming out of Staples and Walmart and Home Depot, and all the legends that I've heard as I come in as a senior VP or an executive VP in an organization, if I tally up all those opportunities that I have in the vertical P&L, often it results in, say, 24 cents per unit. But if I don't understand that the efficiencies I'm gaining with that 24 cents puts the margin of my product at risk on the order of $7.50, I've made a mistake. And that is 99% of our consumer goods business economy in the US today. So this screen that we use for Under Armour right here, this is not proprietary information by any means here. Compression shorts as the category. I can save 24 cents a unit by going to some of the legendary business practice, Harvard Business Review best practices that are out there. But they don't know that I put $7.50 at risk. They couldn't possibly know that because they don't have a best practice on the margin embedded in performance compression shorts. If I save this 24 cents and put that $7.50 at risk, I've done something stupid. That's 99% right there of U.S. consumer goods rationalization acumen inside of U.S. consumer goods business today. This package, Amperage right here, allows us to sanely view that horizontal principle, get away from vertical P&L budget reductions as the basis of incentives, and understand how much I should purchase, when I should purchase it, how I should handle it, and why, and what I have at risk, what margin I have that can return back if I make sound decisions for my business. Risk mitigated demand planning. When I went to Paulo, we actually said, Paulo, if you allow me to step down to 1,800 units, I'll go ahead and pay you the extra 6% on my cost purchases. In fact, if you hold the extra 1,000 or 1,200 units in abeyance and let me order those on short notice, in other words, in an inefficient production run, and it's going to make everybody mad in the factory, I'll pay you 16% more for those because I'm recovering in that situation the full 65% gross margin on that item. That's what we deem to be called risk mitigated demand planning. Demand is not a fixed number that's handed down by God around which we fine-tune our machine mechanisms. Our machine mechanisms are wrong. We need to tune them toward the end state and health of the businesses that consume those goods. And that's the essence of risk mitigated demand planning. So really, as we look at it, the Walmart problem is not just a problem with Walmart. It's something that's replicated across our consumer economy. I argue that it is the instrumental contribution to our extended recession, and it comes from misunderstandings of what constitutes inflation and a babysitting P&L approach on the part of management inside of U.S. consumer goods organizations. 35% of the economy, but I believe it is more than that. I'm Roger Cunningham, and changing that mindset is my mission.